The horrible crimes committed on Halloween. Halloween crimes are usually thought of as the thoughtless mayhem of demented strangers who enjoy poisoning candy or putting razor blades in apples. But crimes committed on Halloween are much more serious, and more real, than those urban legends. There have been numerous murders, kidnappings, and assaults that have taken place on October 31st, and many are directly related to the festivities of the holiday. While it remains debatable whether or not there's a spike in crime on Halloween, there's no debate that all of these particular assaults happened in connection with the holiday. Many of these crimes have been carried out by people who took advantage of the occasion to wear a costume and fool their victims for just long enough to kill them. Others involve people out trick-or-treating, or returning from parties late at night. But as with most violent crime in general, crimes that happened on Halloween are usually committed either by someone known to the victim, or in a case of mistaken identity. In a few cases, the crime has never been solved, and years or decades have gone by with no closure for the loved ones of the victims. Here are some true stories of the worst crimes ever committed in connection with Halloween. Poisoning of Timothy O'Brien. While the vast majority of Halloween scare stories about razor blades in apples or poisoned candy are either urban legends or moral panics, one story is, unfortunately, completely true. And it had nothing to do with a demented stranger randomly killing children. 8-year-old Timothy O'Brien had a packet of pixie sticks given to him by his father Ronald to cap off his trick-or-treating. He almost immediately went into convulsions, and died an hour later. The death sent the O'Brien's small Texas town into a panic, and the police determined that the pixie sticks that Timothy ate were laced with cyanide. When Ronald's story kept changing, police began investigating him. They found him to be deeply in debt, and that he'd taken out massive life insurance policies on his children. Police found that other O'Brien children had also been given the candy by their dad, but hadn't eaten them. Ronald O'Brien was found guilty of murder, sentenced to death, and executed in 1984. Murders of Leslie Matsara and Adrienne Insogna. Late on Halloween night 2004, roommates Leslie Matsara, Adrienne Insogna, and Lauren Menza went to bed after handing out candy. Menza was woken up at 1 a.m. by the sounds of a scuffle. Not knowing what was happening, she ran in terror from the house and hid in the backyard, watching an assailant climb out of a window. When the coast was clear, she ran back upstairs, and found both of her roommates butchered. In the course of the investigation, FBI agents found cigarette butts near the scene of the crime that matched blood evidence inside the house, but found no known matches in any databases. Officers and FBI agents spoke to nearly 1,500 persons of interest during the investigation of the double murder, including one of Insogna's friends, Lily Prudhomme. Her husband, Eric Koppel, became a person of extreme interest during the investigation when he refused to give a sample to exclude him from the suspect pool. Nearly a year after the commission of the crime, Koppel turned himself in and confessed to the deaths of his wife's friends while given no motive for the execution of his crime. If the nature of the murders wasn't heinous enough, consider the fact that Koppel was, at the time of the murders, only engaged to the friend of one of his victims and carried on with the wedding thinking his crimes would not be tied to him. This quote from Adrienne Insogna's mother, Arlene Allen, gives a chilling insight into a murderer who thought he got away with it. "You are the man who is so cruel as to invite me, the mother of the woman you murdered, to stand up for you at your wedding, to read scripture to you at love and death and to bless your union. Throughout that weekend you brought me into the heart of your family, knowing all the while it was you who destroyed mine." Family murders. On Halloween 2010, Ohio teenager Devin Griffin returned home from Sunday church services to find the corpses of his brother Derek, mother Susan, and Susan's new husband William Lisk. The killer had bludgeoned Derek with a claw hammer, shot William 5 times with a .22 caliber pistol, and raped Susan before shooting her 3 times. Devin was so traumatized he could only say it was like something out of a haunted house. The killer was found to be William Lisk's son from a previous marriage, William Lisk Jr., who had a history of schizophrenia and violence. Lisk was picked up at a halfway house, and pleaded guilty to all 3 murders. He committed suicide in prison in 2015. Murder of Tony Bagley. 7-year-old Las Vegas boy Tony Bagley went trick-or-treating on Halloween night in 1994 with his sister, aunt, and mother. They were walking down the street when a man in a hoodie ran towards them with a gun and opened fire, killing Tony. He then jumped into a waiting car and drove away. The killer has never been caught, and police speculated that the shooting was revenge against Tony's father for a drug deal gone wrong. Murder of Carl Jackson. Bronx resident Carl Jackson was a 21-year-old data entry clerk at Morgan Stanley. On Halloween night 1998, Jackson went with his girlfriend to pick up her young son from a party. While there, some teenagers threw eggs at their car, but the classic Halloween prank soon turned really ugly. Jackson got out of his car, exchanged words with the throwers, and got back in the car. Then one of the teens pulled a gun and shot Jackson through the head, killing him instantly. Police arrested 17-year-old Curtis Sterling for the murder, and New York cracked down on egg-throwing pranks, the Woodbridge abductions. In 2009, 3 teenage girls were abducted by a man with a gun on their way home from trick-or-treating in Woodbridge, Virginia. All 3 were taken at gunpoint to a wooded area, and 2 were sexually assaulted. The 3rd girl was able to call her mother, causing the rapist to flee. 2 years later, police arrested Aaron Thomas, who was already suspected in dozens of sexual assaults from 1997 until then. Thomas pleaded guilty in 2012 to the 3 kidnappings,